Alright guys, Murph's here. And today I want to talk about part 2 of the home defense shotgun concept. Now, something I do want to throw out is a little caveat about these videos. Part 1 was talking about different advantages and disadvantages of different types of shotguns in a home defense scenario. That's more or less a standalone video. Part 2 is going to cover the accessorizing and go-to features of a home defense shotgun, and is also more or less going to be a standalone video. You don't have to see part 1 in order to be able to understand a lot of what's going on in part 2. Any themes that cross over between the two, I will spend my time to explain. Now, if you wanted to check out part 1 because this is a concept that's interesting you because you're presently trying to figure out what to use for home defense, then I definitely implore that you go check out part 1. But you don't have to. Just throwing that out there. Now, in addition to that, I also want to cover that I am in no way a legal authority, some sort of tactical guru, nor am I a certified instructor of any type. I'm just a dude who spent a lot of years thinking about this stuff and is presently employing a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. And I've got just one last caveat. So I know this video is about accessorizing your gun in order to be able to apply it properly to a fighting type scenario. But something I want to touch on right off the bat. This is a Remington model 1187 12 gauge semi-automatic shotgun. This shotgun, as it sits right now, is perfectly capable in home defense type scenarios given a specific tactical setup. Given a specific set of circumstances, this gun will serve you just fine for home defense. This is actually a home defense shotgun for me. It is sitting in my ready rack, prepared to be used to defend a doorway and make sure no one comes through it. That's my purpose for the shotgun. So if you're sitting there watching this video and all you have is a sporting type shotgun and all of a sudden you're convinced that you can't defend yourself with it, that's not true. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. All right, now that being the case, let's go ahead and go through features of shotguns and talk about what are some desirable ones that we want to cover for home defense. All right, first off, barrel length. So this is a 26-inch barrel. I would never want to try to clear rooms with a 26-inch barrel. Anything from 21 to beyond that in barrel lengths, because shotgun barrels can be very long, might be fantastic for wing shooting, but is going to be absolutely terrible for room clearing, if that's what you expect to do with your home defense shotgun. Now, like I said, this shotgun in its present configuration, I just use to control doorways. If I have to break cover and actually clear the house, well, in my house, I got a lot of really tight corners and stuff like that, and small spaces I have to negotiate. So I'm actually going to go with a handgun. And I do greatly implore that you integrate multiple weapons into your overall system in tactical evaluation. I also have a video on bedside guns, so check that out if you would, please. Now, 20-inch shotguns, in my opinion, are too long as well. They are fantastic riot guns, and they're really good trench guns, but I don't consider them to be very good for room clearing. Now, this is a personal preference. Now, a counter-argument I would make to me, if I was me, would be that a 20-inch M16 was used for room clearing type operations for years, and that's very true. However, there's a lot of very specific methods you have to utilize with the 20-inch M16 in order to be able to effectively clear rooms. And if you don't practice those techniques before you have to go and do it for real, you're probably not going to execute them very well. And if you don't know how to execute those techniques, you're most definitely not going to execute them properly at the show when you're doing it for real. Now, in addition to that, a 20-inch M16 is lighter, has lighter recoil, and faster follow-up shots. So a lot of those techniques are actually better suited to a 5.56 chambered rifle than they are to a 12-gauge shotgun, especially something like, say, a pump action. Now, 18 inches are the minimum legal barrel length for shotguns. Now, you do have a couple of options out there that kind of find their own way through the rules that are shorter than that. The Mossberg Shockwave is kind of one of the most outstanding aspects of that demographic, I guess you could say. However, I would not necessarily recommend those for home defense, and we'll cover that as we go. If you go below 18 inches, it is still legal to do so depending on your local laws. Again, I'm not a legal authority. as long as you contact the ATF, fill out the appropriate forms, and pay the $200 tax stamp. Now, a lot of people make that sound like it's very, very difficult, and we're not going to get into a discussion about the constitutionality of any gun law, let alone the National Firearms Act of 1934. However, the process is actually not that hard, especially if you're building the gun yourself, which cutting down the barrel on a shotgun would be considered building. It's a Form 1, and the last I checked, it's taken about a month and a half for those to come back. That's pretty quick. If you purchase a short-barreled shotgun, it's going to be more like 10 months before your tax stamp comes back. So take that as you will. I don't have that kind of patience. I barely have patience for a month and a half wait. I'm not good at waiting for things once I paid my money for them. However, a shorter than 18-inch shotgun is going to have a lot more advantages when it comes to room clearing. You're going to be much more successful at that process. You just also need to be very intimately aware of a lot of the legal ramifications of owning and using NFA type items. That's a whole separate video all by itself. Now, sighting systems. So this shotgun has 2 beads on this vent rib right here. That's completely acceptable. Now, when I talked about my home defense rifles video, which again, if you're interested in home defense type systems, please check that video out. I talked about my home defense guns having a minimum of 2 requirements, and that is a sighting system and a light. Now, this shotgun, as you notice, does meet the first requirement of having a sighting system. Bead sights do satisfy that requirement. I have successfully engaged with slugs out to 50 yards with bead sights. It's completely possible. After that, it gets a little dodgy, but 50 is a sustainable expectation with slugs and beads. Now, you know that this shotgun does not have a light on it. Well, now, first off, this is not a fighting shotgun. This is a specific use home defense gun in which I'm going to use the lights in my bedroom to expose the scene. That's the trade-off that when I utilize this gun, I'm willing to make. If you are not willing to make that trade-off, then you might want to check out a couple of things. Things like red dot sights, say on this Maverick 88 that I have outfitted for my purposes. This has a Vortex Crossfire red dot sight on it. Little 2 MOA dot inside of there. What's really great about this sight is that I don't need light at all to be able to use it. And that has a huge advantage to me. If I'm using this shotgun, I don't have to give away my position any more than I want to, and I can still line up on a target in the dark. Bead sights do not afford you that opportunity. Now, you can get a variety of beads, some of which do have tritium inserts. You also have the possibility of being able to get iron sights on shotguns. Now, about 95% of the shotgun market comes with bead sights on it. There are a couple of shotgun manufacturers that prefer to apply rifle-type iron sights to their shotguns. And over the years, I've heard a lot of people complain about that. Why do I need rifle sights on a shotgun? That's just a point-and-shoot type weapon system. Well, it is if you're a wing shooter. It's not if you're using it for tactical applications. At close range, even using buckshot, you're still talking about a very tight shot pattern that is going to require to be accurately aimed. And if you're trying to shoot a little bit further, you might need some iron sights to extend that range beyond 50 yards. And if you get them with tritium inserts, you can even accurately engage a target out beyond that in the dark. A couple of things to take into consideration when we're looking at these. Now, this Vortex Crossfire has worked out great for me, but another optic that you might want to take a look at would be EOTech's. Having that circle around the inner dot is actually really nice for rapid target acquisition that definitely characterizes shotgun style engagements. Now, with red dots, it also makes slug engagement out to 100 yards a lot easier, which generally speaking, 100 yards is going to be about the distance that you're going to be able to engage accurately with a shotgun slug to begin with. Now, you might be asking me, hey, this is for home defense. I don't have a 100-yard long house. Why would I need to take a shot that far? And in normal circumstances and situations, I agree with you 100%. However, something that I would throw out there is presently we're living in times of great civil unrest. So you might actually have a scenario where you might need to defend your home from outside aggressors, perhaps a lot of outside aggressors. Having a slug loaded in really helps with that, and being able to accurately apply that slug is also very important. Now, magnified optics. You know, a lot of guys who are sitting at home with a slug gun with maybe a 4-power scope on it are thinking that they're all good to go when it comes to home defense type scenarios. And this is where I would disagree with you. A magnified optic is great in the woods trying to hunt deer. However, in a home defense type scenario, the vast majority of your slug scopes are just not going to handle close range scenarios very well. I would definitely implore you to either run off of a red dot or even just your beads as opposed to a magnified optic. I do not think they have a very good spot in home defense. All right. So moving from there, well, let's talk about vent ribs and heat shields. So if you get into a longer engagement, you're definitely going to build up heat in your barrel. And that is going to cause there to be a bit of a mirage to your, whatever sighting system you're using. That could be an issue. Now, once again, in normal scenarios, we should be dealing with just a handful of people that don't want to stick around for a fight once the shooting starts. However, with current civil unrest, we might find ourselves engaged in a long-term gun battle. If that's the case, we do need to start to worry about heat dissipation. So on this shotgun, I have a vent rib, which helps with heat dissipation. And on this shotgun, I have an actual heat sink attached to the front of the barrel, which also allows me a lot of real estate for attaching different types of accessories. I would definitely, this gets into pure preference, mind you guys, and pure preference being things that you find through experience that make it easier to operate your weapon system, to be able to apply your weapon system. To me, especially with the increased real estate for attaching accessories that I have decided that I want to have outfitted on a designated fighting shotgun, which is what this is for me, then this really comes into play. This really gives me a lot of options, and I like options. I'm a really big fan of them, especially when it comes to hanging lights off of a shotgun, like this Surefire 600 Scout. All right, I've got a little bit of Picatinny rail that I can mount this on here, and then I can light up my targets as I need to in order to be able to identify what it is that I'm engaging, because that's kind of one of our first steps and one of our firearm safety rules in general, right? Be able to identify our target and beyond. A light gives me that opportunity, especially if I'm trying to just momentarily expose my position, not permanently expose my position. Now, there are a lot of other ways that you can attach lights. There's some that attach in the area between the, like a clamp that goes between the barrel and the magazine tube. That's acceptable. You have some that attach to the barrels. That's not my favorite type of setup, but if it works, it works. And then you can also get entire forearms that are sculpted around a light. Those don't seem to be as popular anymore, and I prefer my lights to remain rigid and in the same position at all times, but that's just my pure preference. To each their own. I would highly implore, as a minimum requirement, you have some sort of lighting solution for your home defense shotgun, be it either mounted on the weapon system or you've incorporated it into your overall fighting plan to use light fixtures within your home to illuminate the scene. Now, let's talk about magazine capacity. So, the vast majority of your tube-fed magazines are going to start at 4-round capacity, and then it's going to extend out to 8, 9, perhaps further if you're starting to use extended magazine tubes like competition style. Now, that will also impact your barrel length, which is to say one way or the other. A lot of the competition extended length tubes I personally do not deem acceptable for home defense type scenarios when it comes to room clearing. They're just big and they're very long, and they're great for using out on a stage for a competition, but once you start actually having to work around corners with them, they kind of start to lend themselves to their own issues. This 1187 is a 4-round capacity. This Maverick is a 5-round capacity, and I don't necessarily feel limited by either. But there's a couple of things that you do need to take into account when we talk about capacity. is that shotguns are always going to be rounds limited in comparison to rifles. So you definitely want to make sure that you are good at reloading a shotgun, be it topping it up or even going all the way from a dry magazine. There's a variety of techniques that you can use to reload a shotgun. There's even some accessories out there that can get you to help you reload shotguns. You can take it to a gunsmith and get the loading port actually kind of flared out and smoothed out so that you can more easily quad or double load, whatever it is that you select as your method, this shotgun. However, if you're going, no matter what you do, if you're going to use a shotgun for home defense, you need to come up with a concept for how it is that you're going to load it, and you need to practice it. I would highly endorse you to seek instruction on this matter. Now, real quick, I touched on it in the last video as well, but we'll talk about it here. Magazine-fed shotguns. I do not endorse magazine-fed shotguns for home defense. Specifically because these guns wind up sitting around loaded far more often than they get fired. And when you load a bunch of soft plastic shells up against actually a spring, which then presses them against the feed lifts of a magazine, eventually those shells will deform, and that's going to cause a lot of malfunction issues. Now, if you went through and regularly cycled out your ammunition, then I guess I have less of an issue to bring up. But if you're not doing that, which my greater emphasis is going to be put on that at some point you're going to have a lapse just because human nature is that way, you're going to wind up running into a malfunction at the worst time possible. Now, for competition type use, magazine-fed shotguns make a lot of sense because you're going to empty that magazine almost as soon as you've loaded it, and you're not going to run into any of those malfunction issues related to compressed shot shells. When we talk about semi-automatic shotguns in general, you still have the possibility for malfunction issues, but that's a pure preference thing on my part. We'll cover that a little later. Actually, you know what? We'll cover it right now. So let's go ahead and talk about different action types. I will always more strongly endorse pump action shotguns than any other type of shotgun. I like having multiple rounds on board. I like that shotgun pump, that the action incorporated with pump action shotguns is inherently more reliable unless the issue is caused by the user, which does happen. However, for the most part, as long as you are racking this thing like you mean it, you're not going to have malfunction issues. Semi-automatic shotguns, of course, have a lot of great attributes when it comes to faster follow-up shots and a little bit softer, lighter recoil. That is very enticing. You just need to spend a lot of time with whatever defensive load you're going to use to make sure that it's going to operate in this gun, because semi-automatic shotguns have a tendency to be ammunition finicky. So if you've not spent a solid amount of time out on the range testing your shotgun with the ammunition you're going to use to defend yourself, you might be putting yourself into a bad spot. Now, let's go ahead and talk about optics mounts. Now, this one, as we can see, we have this laid up where I have a ventilated rib incorporated as well, and I can mount all kinds of optics on here. You can get a lot of different Picatinny mounts that forego this rail here and would be a little bit lighter and they're a little bit smaller. You can mount a variety of optics to it. Those work just fine. Something else to keep in mind when we're mounting things on shotguns are ammunition carriage. So how this shotgun is set up right now, I don't have a lot of good options to mount external ammunition containers, be it side saddle type setups or whatever it may be. There's a wide variety of them out there. I don't have any room for that on this shotgun, and I actually, as the years have gone by, I consider this a huge miss and something I'm planning on addressing here in the short term. You can get entire vent rib optics mount setups that do have side saddles. They are also going to be rather heavy, just to keep that in mind. If it's a home defense type setup and you're not going to be carrying it for days on end, it really shouldn't be that big of an issue. It just might be a little bit slower to get into action, but if you're not carrying it, the weight isn't as important. Now, there are a couple other methods that you can use. You can get those nylon shell holders that attach to buttstocks, just kind of pull over them. I've never been a big fan. I have run them on guns. I've run them on rifles and shotguns. Between the two, I prefer shotguns because at least the shells have a rim, so there's something to catch against that nylon, and they're less likely to work their way out of there eventually and fall on the ground and get lost. However, you can still force the rimmed shell all the way through the nylon holder, so it's really not the best setup in the world. It's just a very cheap and expedient method, and I would highly recommend removing those and getting something like a side saddle or any other applicable accessory much sooner. You can also do bandolier type setups. Now, this shotgun is unloaded. Just this is coming out of another part of my home defense arrangement, so I'm keeping the shells on the bandolier to also demonstrate just how heavy this setup is. This is super uncomfortable, and especially when you consider that it's hanging off the back of the weapon and actually kind of gets in the way of me interfacing with the pistol grip, it's really not enjoyable to work around. I've got an entire box of shells here and it feels like it. So the bandolier type setups that attach to guns, do not recommend. I would actually sooner you have a bandolier separate from the firearm that you drape around yourself like some sort of bandit from a bad Western movie and incorporate that into your home defense scenario than I would run off of this. Oh, that was a Winchester 1200 20 gauge Franken shotgun 12 gauge Franken shotgun that we'll talk about here in the next couple of weeks. Now let's talk about pistol grip stock setups. Now, a full pistol grip shotgun in a defensive type arrangement does make it a little bit easier to control the weapon system, to pull it back into your shoulder to make sure that you have a nice stock and cheek weld and all that kind of stuff. That is kind of nice. It is very advantageous. It's more comfortable, especially for defensive type use. Now you'll also notice that this particular stock is side folding. And I selected this stock because it has a very beefy recoil pad on it, because a lot of your folding stock type options, especially the metal top folders, are very skeletal and not comfortable if you're running actual defensive loads, like good buckshot or something like that. It's not enjoyable to shoot out of it. This, on the other hand, is actually fairly comfortable, except for this pivot point right here. And this is something else to keep in mind. You might have to adjust your cheek weld a little bit in order to not cram your nose into the hinge point on this shotgun stock. That's neither here nor there. This is an ATI stock. It's actually been fairly good as long as you remember this pivot point right here. Now, there's a whole variety of stocks that you can get out there. And even a semi-pistol grip like this stock still allows you to get a good firm grip on the shotgun and really pull it into your pocket. So don't consider yourself limited just because you don't have a pistol grip type stock. Now, pistol grip only type shotguns I do not recommend for home defense type scenarios because they are very difficult to use accurately. Now, for very close range spray type operations, these are great. But when you come up to actually trying to line up on a target like this, if you're not holding the shotgun very rigidly, you might just pop yourself in the face. And you look real silly doing it. You'll see a lot of times people advocate that these be fired more or less from the hip, and that does help you manage recoil, and it does help you control the shotgun. It does not help you from an accuracy standpoint beyond very far. Now, if you're just covering a door, then shotguns like this or the Shockwave and stuff like that start to make a little bit more sense. You just have to realize the limitations in what you've selected and work around those appropriately. And that's the biggest part. No matter what it is that you pick, you need to have a plan to employ it. This shotgun, since it's so difficult to aim and I have to do so more or less from the hip in order to be able to control it, I have an incorporated laser on it, as you can see right there. So this is supposed to help me aim with this shotgun. There are laser type setups out there that are supposed to more accurately replicate what a shot pattern would look like downrange. That is another thing that you can employ in conjunction with the shotgun. I don't think it's necessarily very important, but if that's the thing that really catches your eye and you think it might be very helpful to you, then go for it. That's just as long as you are making sure that you outfit the shotgun in such a manner that is useful to you. Now, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. To more or less summarize, the same rules that I apply to rifles when it comes to setting them up for home defense more or less apply to shotguns, with a couple of caveats that you can utilize. And you can use that with rifles as well. If you just want to run iron sights and then use the lights in the room that you're in to backlight the scene so that you can accurately engage a target, then go for it. However, I would really advocate that your shotgun be a little more optimized for the actual scenario that you'll get into. Give yourself options so that you can utilize them appropriately. This 1187 is a great stand-in for the moment, but I have options readily available that resemble something more akin to this than they do this. This has a very specific purpose and a very specific application, and I would sooner use something more configured like this if I have to do any serious defensive work. Alright guys, that's just a couple things that I wanted you guys to keep in mind as you selected your home defense weapon system. There is going to be one more part at least to this video series, so I look forward to sharing that with you when we get there. So until that time, have a good day.